Welcome to this video tutorial on the creation of grass material in V-Ray for Rhino. I've made a simple scene here where we've got a courtyard with a tree and we've got a sunlight as well, and we're going to be creating grass on this blue plane outside our view here. Now to start, we're going to just render out a preview of what our view looks like currently, and you can see we've got a kind of white floor here with a tree in our courtyard. Now I'm going to open up the V-Ray asset editor here, and we're going to make our grass material. So to do that, we're just going to make a new generic material. We're going to rename it grass, and then we're just going to apply this material to this blue plane here, like so. Now what we're going to start to do is we're going to start by just applying a kind of grass texture, just an image texture of some grass onto this plane here. Now I've got my particular grass image from cgtextures.com, and I just downloaded one of these tileable grass maps. If you get a seamless one, they'll lap over nicely together and it will create a kind of seamless surface. So what we'll do is we're going to select our grass material, and much like we've gone through before in previous videos, we're just going to add it into the diffuse map here, just by selecting bitmap, selecting that grass texture there, open, and then it will apply it onto our plane. Obviously as well, you'll need to texture map this grass. At the moment mine looks quite small, so I'm just going to go back, select the object, and in texture mapping here we're going to just make the size a bit bigger. Let's do it at 3000 by 3000, and I'll have a look at how that's coming out. Maybe that's a bit too big actually. Now let's do it at 2000. Sometimes it just takes a bit of kind of adjusting until you get a decent size that looks good in the context of the image. So I think that's fine for the time being. Now obviously with this, the grass is very flat, and because of the view we're getting a kind of very sort of flat, and it's very obvious that it's not an actual kind of grass material. We're just getting a kind of flat surface treatment. You can adjust that slightly, so what we'd want to do is you don't really want much reflection, but in the maps we can turn on the bump map and we can just copy the diffuse. I'm just going to copy that and I'm just going to paste it in the bump, and that's going to give us a little bit of sort of definition and a bit more kind of variety in the grunt, but it's still quite subtle. We're not really getting too much change there, we're not really reading it. So one of the features of V-Ray is this option called V-Ray Fur, and it's a really good way of creating or simulating grass-like texture or material surface to an object. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a go at using V-Ray Fur to make a kind of simple grass material on top of here. So I'm just going to stop that option. We'll minimize these two windows. And with our plane selected, we're going to go up to our V-Ray settings and we're just going to click on this Add Fur to Selection there. And what that would do is it will make a kind of fur object, which is now added in to that. And you won't really see it, it might be quite small. You can see here, mine's very small. It gives you a little preview of what it is. It doesn't matter the size of the object. All that matters is when we've made it, if we open up our asset editor again and go to our objects, you'll see we now have this fur object here. And if I open up my render preview as well while I do this, and we'll just start to load it, what's going to happen is it's going to start kind of building little hairs or little kind of bits of fur that are going to start building on this grass texture. You'll notice it might take a lot longer to load up now we've made this V-Ray Fur, and that's because the way it works is it takes quite a kind of while to load the geometry in, because it has to build bits of fur on top of there. So bear that in mind when you're rendering something using V-Ray Fur, that it might take a bit longer to render. So we're just going to let that render out. And you'll see now that that's rendering that we've got these huge hair-like objects that have come up on our surface. Now the reason for this is because we haven't adjusted the scale of these yet, so they're much larger than we need them to be. So we can go to back to our objects, our fur objects, and we can play around with this length, and the length will be kind of equal to whatever units you're set up in. So I'm set up in meters at the moment, so my length is currently 4 meters high, so that's much too big. So we want them to be, let's try a 0.1 here, and let's lower the thickness right down to 0.01. So you can see now they're kind of little hairs, and let's make them a little bit bigger there. And probably let's make them a bit slimmer. 5. This is one of those things you kind of need to play around with a bit as well. So now we've got thin hairs, but there's not very many of them. There's quite a few. For grass, we do want to taper them, so that means they're kind of refine up to a kind of thin point at the end. So we'll put the taper up to 1. And we're now going to up the count. So instead of 0.6 per area, we're going to up it. Let's try it. Let's do it bit by bit so we can see the difference. So put it to 10. You can see here we now have a few more. And let's put this right up now to 1,000. And now there's kind of lots and lots of these bits of grass. So you see now we're starting to get something a bit more like kind of a grass material going on there. We've got these kind of fine hairs across our image. We can play around with the kind of bend of these. So if you want them perfectly straight, if we put a bend of 0, they'll be standing perfectly straight up in the air. So, and let's give them a bend of kind of a 0.2, should we? See how that goes. We want them to be relatively straight, but slightly bent as well, like grass would be. Maybe 0.4. We can also play around with the variance. So this is how much they kind of the variety of them. So if we up the length variance, you'll get some that are really small and some that are really tall. So there's a bit of a difference. You can change the direction they're facing, which will kind of spin them round. So there's lots of kind of parameters in here that we can use to affect how these look and how these are placed. I'm going to just lower the length back down slightly here. And I'm going to just up the number of them. We'll just put it up to 1,500, I think. Now, obviously, these are still white at the moment. They haven't got any grass texture on, so the last thing you need to do with this object is apply material to it. And if we scroll down to the material here, we can just turn on the material option, and we can actually select where it says none. We can select one of the materials we've already made, so I can select my grass texture, and it will just map that texture directly onto the grass. And this is where it works quite well, because it will kind of take the scaling and the mapping of the material we already have on that plane and apply it to our grass. We'll get that sort of differentiation in different bits of grass. So we've got some that are slightly off colour, some that are green, which matches that texture below, which is why that's kind of a really important part of the step. And there you have it. I mean, you can play around with different features if you want to change the length or the kind of the density of it, but that is how you create a simple grass material in V-Ray. Thanks for watching, and if you want to watch any other videos on material creation in V-Ray or other tricks in Rhino, please check out the videos. Thanks.